They have now consolidated the number one, number two. They were number one. Now they own the number two. This acquisition will allow Reliance Retail to command 1/3 of the bricks and mortar stores. How do you take that linear offering that gets you a huge audience of consumers, and how do you channel those consumers into your digital platform assets? Reliance Retail now has a nice little war chest to go and figure that out. We've covered Geo in the past. Reliance Industries owns Geo. Geo has multiple business units. The way kind of these Indian companies are capitalized and they kind of take them public, it's really interesting in India. But anyway, they're bringing all of these sub-business units within Geo, which is the telecom business first and foremost, which now has these silos of platform businesses on top of it. We did a big deep dive report that came out a few weeks ago. You can go on to hacks.applicoinc.com to find that report. That's the Reliance Geo deep dive report. We covered how Geo was raising money from all the top PEs that are out there. And now this is a separate division than those raises. So those raises were in what's called Geo Platforms. And now this is called Reliance Retail Ventures. This is a separate business unit. They will collaborate, but those are, like Facebook, and Facebook put a bunch of money into Geo Platforms, and they're working on like different chat and content platforms, communication platform integrations, right? Geo Mart is the kind of digital unit underneath Reliance Retail Ventures. And Reliance Retail Ventures is what is ultimately now has just raised a few $1 billion. This article is saying $3.4 billion from some similar PEs, TPG, Silver Lake, KKR. Some of those guys were also in the Geo Platforms investment deal, which just happened in the past couple months. The interesting thing here is Reliance Industries, through Reliance Retail, bought this company called Future Group for about $3.3 billion US a month ago. What is Future Group? Great question. India's Reliance Retail to acquire Future Group's units, $3.4 billion. And it is the second largest retail chain in India. I believe second to Reliance Retail. So they have now consolidated the number one, number two. They were number one. Now they own the number two. So collectively, they're an even stronger number one. Retail, I'm talking bricks and mortar. To the tune of this acquisition will allow Reliance Retail to command 1/3 of the bricks and mortar stores of India's modern retail sector. Interesting, right? This stuff is a direct competitor to what Walmart and Flipkart are doing in India, what Amazon is doing in India. Now, these are retail stores. Geo Mart is the e-commerce division underneath Reliance Retail. These PEs are investing in Reliance Retail, right? So technically, Reliance Retail has bricks and mortar now, I guess 1/3 of the modern retail in India, and they own Geo Mart. Interesting, right? So, and it's all underneath it's all underneath kind of the umbrella and sharing synergies with Reliance's Geo Telecom network, right? And they've got hundreds of millions of users. They have a constellation app strategy. They are cross-pollinating users into all their different apps. Geo Mart certainly being one of those apps. He kind of gave away a lot of that telecom, basically like these cell service plans with like 50 gigs of data for, I don't know, like $5 or $10 a month, something crazy cheap and lots of data. And said, here you go. And got hundreds of millions of people to sign up. That cost a few $1 billion and took a handful of years. He got a lot of critical mass, and then he started to launch all these apps. Some of those apps were platforms. Some of those apps were just kind of linear service offerings, like they kind of bought like a Spotify version in India and rolled that into the offering. So they started to get
you can have these app bundles. App bundles are something you don't really see much on iOS, but you see them a lot on Android, and you see them a lot on Android in India. So they're pushing their app bundles. They're getting cross-pollination across all these apps, this kind of constellation app strategy. And so now GeoMart is going to benefit from that. But now GeoMart is also going to benefit from the fact that a third of the modern retail stores in India also are under the same umbrella. The interesting thing in India is you have a lot of these, like, I think they call them Kirana shops, kind of like local shops. And these local shops, not only will they sell you stuff, they'll also act as like an ATM. They'll also let you like exchange products, or they'll do a bunch of like e-commerce services. They'll do ATM services. They'll do a bunch of services on behalf of other digital businesses because they're close to the consumer. And there's India's a big place. There's a lot of people. There's infrastructure challenges, and it's just hard to get penetration into all the disparate parts of the country. So there are these companies that just specialize in trying to like provide these networks of Kirana shops that then, they sell you products, but then they provide a bunch of other services that, that you can kind of like tap into. This article here kind of touches on that. The retail arm launched GeoMart, an e-commerce venture, earlier this year. That initiative aims to connect mom and pop stores called Kiranas with consumers. GeoMart is active in more than 200 cities in India. It's an important part of their sales channel. There's a platform dynamic inherent in that, right? Helping to connect these shops with consumers on products and other services that Geo has, and will all, I'm sure, be a part of this kind of Reliance Retail strategy here. I think the question is, how do you take the brick and mortar retail presence that you have, and how do you turn that into a digital asset, right? How do you It makes sense to, and that was the key thing that our deep dive focused on when we did the deep dive on Geo and Reliance, was they have this linear offering called free or super cheap telecom, cell plan. How do you take that linear offering that gets you a huge audience of consumers, and how do you channel those consumers into your digital platform assets? And so we spent a lot of time really kind of looking at that in the report. I kind of paraphrased it there a minute ago. And the question here is, how do you take all these retail stores and then siphon, how do you turn that analog demand, so analog revenue, right? I'm selling stuff to people in the store. How do I turn that into digital value? Good example about how Walmart did that in the US with grocery was allow you to order your groceries through an app and pick them up at the store, right? I think we're going to see this GeoMart, right, which is already talking about providing services and connecting mom and pop, the Kiranas, with consumers. I think you're going to see GeoMart overlay a lot of these digital tools and services, right? How do I show what is in all these shops to consumers, right? How do I help now a third of these modern retail stores, that between what Reliance Retail had and with this future group acquisition, how do I take that asset, which I spent $3.4 billion on, and convert that into digital value? And I think that's this overlay. How can GeoMart overlay these things on top of these linear traditional analog stores? And you're essentially, you're not disintermediating because they already own the stores, but you're putting that digital layer on top of the stores. And now that means you're creating digital connections with the analog customer, turning the analog customer into a digital customer. And now you have a whole slew of options of what you want to do with those users, right? Now you can go do e-commerce and marketplace, right? Can't really do marketplace in a brick and mortar store. Doesn't really line up. You got to get them into an app. You got to get them into that digital experience. And so we've seen Walmart do a good job of this in the US, kind of bringing those digital assets closely intertwined with their analog stores. And I think we're going to see Reliance now do this in India. Now, the question is, great, sounds good on a high level, but how do you execute it, right? Where do you start? Where do you focus? What are those really kind of seamless integration points that if you build this, you give this capability, it is a net additive and seamless experience to the consumer. And that shopping and that consumer experience in India is going to be very different than what worked here in the United States. The good news is that Reliance Retail now has a nice little war chest to go and figure that out. They'll be able to drive digital users from the Jio Telecom network to Jio Mart. So that's one plus. But the real money, the real crux of this is how do they take those analog users and bring them into that digital Jio Mart universe? We'll see if they can pull it off, but I think they're thinking about it in the right direction. I think they've got smart people behind this. And they've got it well financed. Now it's time to execute, right? Similarly, it's time to execute for what they're doing on the Jio platform side too, to a certain degree. They have gotten, I'd say, arguably, farther along in the business model there than this. This is a little bit newer, but still, I think from everything that we've seen so far, this looks pretty attractive. The other good news is if you similarly think it's attractive, apparently these businesses will be doing public offerings in India in the near future. So you can decide for yourself. Hi, this is Alex from Winner Take All. Thanks for joining us. Hope you enjoyed the content. Feel free to leave a comment, ask us questions, and definitely make sure to join us on our next live stream.